We're here to do the easy consumption of microservices presentation. And I am Ted Tollefson. I've been doing software development for 20 plus years. I work at Kroger as a software architect. I've been in retail, chemical, and music industry.
Hi, I'm Shawn Sherwood. Like Ted, I've been in the industry for a while. Prior to Kroger, I've worked in telecommunications, finance, and bioinformatics.
So who is Kroger? It's the number 17 on the Fortune 500, so it's a fairly large company. It goes by a lot of names. You'll see some of them up there. If you're on the West Coast, you might know Ralph's. That's effectively Kroger. And there's a bunch of other stats there. The slides will get published. All right, so what's the point of this presentation? We want to make it easy to produce and consume microservices in a consistent way. So, all right, that sounds great, but how do we actually go about doing that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take the Spring Initializr and fork it. How many people here have used start.spring.io? All right, pretty good show of hands. I was just getting some fresh stats. It sounds like that's currently creating about 150,000 projects per month. So it gets a lot of usage. I think it validates that it's a really solid concept as a way to get your project started. So the agenda is going to be how do we fork that and get set up. Then we're going to show how do you set up a third-party dependency so that you can use it. How do you set up a VCS ignore file in your generated stuff. Then we're going to get into how to write tests for it. And then how to create a microservice archetype with some customizations. And time permitting, we'll get into the super secret bonus round. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so for the live code.
So enough with the slides.
Yeah.
Real quick, I want to give you a bit of an introduction just to make sure that if you haven't used the initializer, it is your place to go to generate Spring Boot apps, and it has a lot of options, dependencies, and then you select generate, and it'll download a zip file for you, and then you can import that in your IDE and continue your development. So we are going to make sure that I've got my development environment set up so I can actually start modifying this. So I've got a fork of the initializer in my own personal GitHub. I've made actual check-ins for the different steps that I'll follow. So after the presentation, there'll be links available to you where you can just go and look at it. I also have a document that's in a repo that's just next to it that has really detailed instructions for how to follow along on this if you want to go home and try to do it yourself. So to prove that I actually have this working, real quick, I'm going to make a very small change to the HTML template that is behind the initializer. And I have DevTools and live reload running, so I didn't have to reload that. So I'm actually hooked up, ready to develop.
All right, so there are the detailed instructions on how to set up your development environment, so we're kind of skipping over that part, but the links have all the information on that. So our first scenario, we have project teams. Like most, they have a properties file, but they're not encrypting their values in the properties file, and we want them to do that with anything that's sensitive. So we want to make it easy for them to do the right thing, and our solution for that then is going to be to add in JASIPed Spring Boot starter option to the initializer. Initializer is effectively what runs start.spring.io, so we're going to show you how to do that.
Okay. It's going to be a common use case if you're going to customize the initializer where you're going to want to add in additional libraries. I picked this third-party library because it's available for everybody to actually look at and use, but also because it is a Spring Boot aware project that's not actually underneath the Spring Boot umbrella. So you get the advantage of using a third-party library and also the advantage of using Spring Boot and auto configuration. So to add a third-party dependency, there is a small amount of YAML that you have to include.
Yeah, so what he was doing there is there was just a chunk of YAML describing the JASIP library, like the group ID, artifact ID, that kind of typical stuff for a dependency.
And I'm going to add it right underneath the ops section.
So this is the application.yaml file within the Initializr code base. So it's the way Initializr is set up, it's super easy to add in your own custom dependencies.
So I created a topic component and then with other called custom, so I could put any of my custom things underneath there. In this case, I'm adding just the JASIP library. I put a description in and the group ID and artifact ID that links to that dependency. I'll also add in a version number, and this is something that's not usually seen when you look at the other descriptions within the boot YAML. This is because it's not under Spring Boot's management, so that might be something that you have to account for. You can also actually develop your own BOM where you could manage these versions. That is, if you're going to end up with a lot of third-party or custom dependencies, you'll probably want to look at doing that. So I'll kick that off and look at my copy of the initializer. And when I just start typing in JASIP, you can see now that library is available to me. And because I added a description, I can even type in like the word encryption and it'll show up. So it'll actually match on your descriptions.
So when we talk about the easy consumption of microservices, let's say back in your office you have some web service that's out there and it's kind of complicated to call. You might create a client library for that, and then if you just do this one small little step, then you could run your own custom version of start.spring.io, and that would be an option to your teams. So anytime they want to call that service, they just click the button, boom, that dependency is automatically in their Maven or Gradle file, and they're ready to go.
So I generated it, and real quick I'll open up the POM file, and you can see that the dependency has now been included. So we have the JASIP library included with our project. And I actually have a version of this running where I made a small modification to the application properties. I talk about it a little bit in the presentation itself, where I'm using the JASIP encryption to store these properties. And when you look at it now on the NV of the actuator, you can actually see that the password's been unencrypted. I have the second one there with password specifically because you can see that it actually stars it out. Spring Boot will actually do that for you if you name it with the word secret or key or password. Or yeah, not secret, but password.
Yeah. How many people are using Actuator here? Oh wow, so that's a great library to include from Spring. It's like you get loads of free functionality. You just have to drop it into your project, and it gives you a ton of the endpoints like he was showing there. That was the ENV endpoint, but there's like, I think 20 of them, and they keep adding better and better stuff. So definitely worth checking out.
So probably in your organization you have libraries that you've built that you can't share outside with the outside world. This would be how you could make those available to your teams to select right from the initializer, your custom version of the initializer. And this example I was showing has the starter concept to it. So if you can take those libraries and wrap them with a starter and auto config, it makes it just that much better for people to be able to use and consume that library.
Yep. Cool. So next up, the scenario we're going to talk about is we have developers on teams who keep checking in like binary files into source code control, and we really don't want that. So the simple solution is to give them an ignore file. But we want to make sure that they don't have to do that manually each time. We want to just automatically pop that into the project anytime they start a new project. So that's where we're going to go modify the initializer. This time, instead of adding in like a Maven controlled dependency, we're actually going to just add in a file to the project that's created.
So to be fair, there actually is a ticket opened up on the Spring Initializr itself to do this. This is just one way of possibly doing that. So I took advantage of a website called getignore.io. I don't know if anybody has used this before, but it saves me a lot of time. You just go in and type in the types of things that are part of your project, and it'll generate a fairly complete gitignore file. So I'll take this and introduce it in as a template. So what do I mean by a template? The generator that's underneath of the Spring Initializr makes heavy use of Groovy templates. And so any of the types of things that are generated in the final zip file are probably housed within this templates directory. So real quick, I'll just add a new gitignore file. Say yes. I did have to make one change to the gitignore that doesn't actually come from gitignore, and it actually has to do with the Maven wrapper jar. For whatever reason, that wasn't included. So I was having some issues further downstream because that was not being checked in, and it needs to be. So in addition to having the template, there's one other thing that I need to modify, and that's actually the generator itself. Inside the project generator, there is this do generate project structure, and this is where most of the main work is actually being done, taking the templates and putting them in the directory right before it gets zipped up. So I'm just going to introduce this, and what this is going to do is going to take that file, that template file that I created, the gitignore, run it through a Groovy template engine, passing in the model that is all the attributes of things that you've selected on the form itself, and then produce a .gitignore file. And generally, this would be all you would need to do to make a template work and be introduced into the initializer. However, I found an interesting edge case with the gitignore itself. The zip process that's being used by, I'll bring it up actually right now, the main controller is using an ant builder to do a zip file set. And the zip file set just conveniently decided to ignore a bunch of files that it thought you would never want to include. And obviously in this case, we really want it to be included. So real quick, I'll just add this. It was interesting to track down, but actually a very simple fix to it. So, and what that did is just put another option on this to say, don't exclude those default values.
And really, this whole talk is about setting teams on the right path from the start. And so we'll keep building up what we do here. The dependency was the easiest thing to add. Now we're doing some files, and the archetypes are coming up shortly. And then we'll build further from there.
And I have an error.
So one of the things we've seen is that we've had the question asked to us, hey, how often do we really start new projects? Are we doing it that frequently? Is it worth getting in here and doing this? I would say the fact that start.spring.io gets used 150,000 times a month says that, yes, getting a fast way to start projects is worth it. But we've seen that you get all kinds of benefits when your teams start new projects in a consistent way. And I think a good example of that is we had a consistent Maven setup that we were using for a long time. And Shawn joined the team, and he looked at that and he said, oh, hey, why aren't you guys using Sonar right now? And because all the project teams were doing things in a very consistent way, we were able to very quickly set up a Sonar build on our continuous integration server, publish that out, and start to capture trends in our code coverage and things like that. So I think it highlights the power of putting teams in a consistent mode. How you doing?
I don't know. Maybe I misspelled it. If not, what I can do is I can just, since I've done most of this already, I can go ahead and jump forward.
Yeah, and so here he's going to show each one of these steps, the doc he refers to, that's all out on GitHub, so everything he's copying from to do these steps is already out there for you to take a look at. At the end of the presentation, we have links to that. And then in addition to that, the code, the forked code, is all out in GitHub as well. And there's branches for each one of the steps. So if you get hung up on anything, you could just check out one of those branches and get to a clean state for that particular implementation.
So let's restart that. So basically, it was the exact same thing of having a git ignore, having that right in the project generator and in the main controller, having the exclude.
And I guess everybody noticed that it's actually a Spring Boot project, which you would totally expect it to be.
So go ahead and add that. Do the generate for S2. And you can see now that I have a git ignore file. So very pretty straightforward to make this happen. Of course, live coding, but I have my backup. So the git ignore file is there, and when your developer goes to commit their code, they won't have files that you don't want showing up.
All right, so the git ignore file is pretty straightforward. It's a static file, right? It's got the same rules every time. Our next scenario is that we want to generate a README for the project, and we want to put in various information in there. And that way, a team has the details of how the project got started, and even some instructions on how to use the things within the project. And we're going to leverage the templating capability there to do that.
So like I had done before, we'll create a new file. And I'll use the ASCII doc format instead of a markdown. I'll talk through this right here. Since it's a Groovy template, you can see that basically what I did is I'm executing Groovy right within that template. So when this template gets processed and put into the directory right before the zip process, it'll have that substitution. And in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and do the next step with this, actually, and show you what else can be done.
Nope. Did you get? Yeah, good.
Yep. Because this model, the model that you've got of the options that you've got selected get introduced in through the template. Oh, yeah, you're right.
I'll get it.
You get things like the project name become available, the description, and you can even do introspection then on the dependencies that are available. So I'm having it output the dependencies that were selected by the user at the time that they did the generate. And I actually wanted to add this extra little complexity to this, which was if they've selected a specific dependency, it gives me the option to put in maybe some extra information. In this case, if they pick JASP, I'm just going to put in the text that will give them a link to the library so they can get more information. And since I missed this, I'll go back and put that in the...
Yeah, and obviously, this is just an example of how you can use the templates to generate something dynamically at the time of project generation. We've kicked around some different ideas of what else we might do with it. There's a check style project, which everybody really loves. It's good at keeping consistent formatting of your code, so that might be another file that you'd want to generate.
Yeah, you can think that there's all kinds of potential files that you might want to do, like a Docker file even.
There you go, yeah.
So now when I pick my project and do the generate.
So he's going through that pretty quickly, but when we talk about giving the team a project, That's, for those who haven't used start.spring.io, that's what it's doing, is it's taking all the base files you need to have a project started, and it's just zipping those up, and that's what's downloading each time when he clicks that button.
Yeah, so now I've captured some of that key information, and you might want other parts of this to be templatized depending on how you want the readmes to look.
Wait, we'll talk about that.
Yes.
So it worked.
Yeah, it worked. You can see the dependencies that I had selected. You can see now that this JASP dependency, since it was selected, that little snippet of information is included. And you can see that the time and date is included at the bottom.
I told him he looked a little shady, so we should put in a timestamp so people can see that that actually ran. Look at that, they didn't even laugh. They didn't think you're shady. All right.
Okay.
So, all right. So that was the README file, and you can see how to do that. It's relatively straightforward. But hey, man, you've been doing all this work. have you written a single test? Okay, all right. Give me your TDD card right now. All right.
Well, actually, I think I've got something.
All right, let's see. So as we're making these modifications, clearly we want the generator to work consistently for our teams. So it's a good idea to test out your customizations.
And yeah, I even have a whole step on this.
Oh, who knew?
So as you would expect, the project generator has a test case, or a test suite, and I want to introduce a test myself to test some of the stuff that I've actually already modified. So here's a really simple one where I'm going to just generate a default web project, and after that project is generated as part of the test, I'm going to verify that the files actually exist as part of that. And I'm going to hope for a green bar.
One little side note here, we're just throwing this straight into the file that's already there, or the test class. That's probably not a best practice. There's frequent changes to the initializer, and it's constantly getting new and great functionality. So really, you should try and put all your enhancements into like separate files as much as possible. It'll make it easier to take the newer versions of initializer as you go. That's something we learned kind of the hard way.
So I'm going to do something maybe a little bit more advanced. You noticed when I selected the JASP library, the README actually would be a little different than if it wasn't selected. So I want to verify with a custom assertion. There's actually a bunch of custom assertions that are already built into this project assert. So I'll paste in this code that I wrote. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, does a file exist? Yes. And if it does, it has the content that you've expressed. So now I can write a test case, which is going to be a little bit more complicated, but it will verify then that has produced the output as expected. So this is setting up the project with a specific dependency and adding a couple of dependency groups to it, and then doing this create project request. Then the output of that will be tested with these assertions. And so here's my new assertion that I just created that will say that I expect the special ASCII doc format with the word JASP in it. So now when I run that test case, assuming all goes well, I should see a green bar. Yeah, sweet. I get to keep my card.
Yeah, there you go. You can hold on to it. Nice job. All right, so that's how you do the unit test. Now, to kind of the title of the talk, the microservice archetype, we have teams, a bunch of different teams that are creating microservices. We want to make sure that they create them in a consistent way. There are certain best practices that we really want to bake into the projects that are generated. So Actuator would be one example of a best practice. It's a really nice feature to have in your project, so we want all projects to do that. So in order to do that, we're going to modify the initializer to have an archetype concept, or basically a whole bunch of libraries that get included automatically.
Okay, you probably noticed that I've had to type in like web and actuator a couple of times, and I'm lazy, so I want to fix that so I don't have to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the HTML, the home HTML, and I'm going to add a drop down to it that will allow me to select. I get the line number. From a list of candidates. And that list of candidates could include the different types of reference architectures that you want to produce from the initializer itself.
Yeah, so for this talk, we're focused on a microservice, but you could have like a mobile reference architecture. And then the nice thing about that is Spring Boot's an opinionated stack, but they can only go so far. With your own mobile reference architecture, you could take your company's look and feel and bake that into the reference architecture. That way, when a team starts the project, they can really focus on the business functionality, and the look and feel that they need to adhere to is already in there right from the start.
Because I'm a good computer programmer, I put in foo and bar just to have a little extra on there. But right now, when I select it, nothing's actually happening. Well, obviously, I have to put some behavior behind that. So there's actually a JavaScript file that I need to add some behavior to. So if I follow along with my presentation and include this, I'll start seeing behavior. So this is really going to do is just check for the on-change event, and depending on what you selected, it's going to check the individual starters that I want to be part of that one. And in this case, my REST one, I picked actuator and Hystrix security because I want to make sure my stuff is secure, JASIP, and the Sleuth library. And if you haven't seen Sleuth, by the way, please check it out. It's a very, very cool project. I also have DevTools in there. That's another great one. So now, behavior-wise, I should start seeing this. I left ad hoc there too, so that it preserves the existing behavior. So now when I select that, all of a sudden, all those things are already selected for me, so I don't have to worry about it. I don't even really have to think about it. I just want a microservice, and I want to make sure that it's got all the things available to it that I think should be required.
You want to share the full version with the checked or no?
What's the question?
Switching to full version if you wanted to see those.
Yeah. Yep, if you open up the full version, you'll see that the behavior is all there. Go back to, I like the simple version. So I generated that.
And just to prove that they didn't just show up on the screen, but they actually, all right, yeah, we're good. All right. So what we're going to do now is show that we can actually take that thing we just generated, and that it is in fact a microservice, and microservice where it has a REST endpoint. We're just going to hit the REST endpoint and see some JSON come back. So we've already downloaded S4. Yeah. We've downloaded the project, and we're just going to go ahead and build it and run it. That's the other nice thing about Actuator. You may have noticed that we didn't actually code anything for the microservice, so it's really kind of an empty microservice. But the Actuator endpoints are automatically in there, so we automatically have a REST endpoint that we can hit.
And if you're used to looking at Spring Boot logs, you'll already see there's a few things that are a little different. The Sleuth library is already active. Oop. Now if I go bring that up and hit the env, wait, I'm being blocked.
Uh-oh. We didn't expect that.
Now, because I enabled security now, I can't hit that endpoint because it's now considered a secured endpoint. But I do know, since the default behavior of Spring Boot is to actually echo out that password somewhere up here.
Well, Actuator, yeah. Oh, no, yeah, you're right. Spring Boot does it.
Yeah. I'm not seeing it. I think I might have fonts too big.
You can always just hit the health endpoint.
Yep.
Yeah, let's just do that.
Okay.
So the info and health endpoints in Actuator are not security protected,
Right.
so we're able to just jump in.
And actually, I'm just seeing an interesting behavior because I'm not logged in. I'm only seeing the up. If you're logged in, you would then see that like Hystrix is available, and the disk space is not getting too low.
So best microservice ever? Right? All right, well, it is running, that's the point. Oh,
Somehow
whoa.
I'm going
Oh, you're
giving it away.
All right.
Okay.
So let's see, I think we're doing all right on time, so we can get into the bonus round. Really, everything we've been focusing on so far is on the code generation side, but we want to make it easy for teams to get going. So why not go ahead and initialize their version control, right? So we know that we want them to use version control. I think everybody's in agreement with that. So we can just change Initializr to go ahead and initialize
Ted,
Git.
that's crazy.
Well, I'm not worried about it. You're the ones that's got to demo it.
I think I got this one. I think I can do this. So I'm actually going to jump ahead on the steps to the step that has this included. And I'll talk through some of what I'm doing. Reset this.
And this is just one example of something you might want to do that's beyond just the code generation. Obviously, whatever you are doing in your shop, you might want to automate through this process.
I'm doing this because I'm introducing a new library to actually allow us to do some of the operations. I'm including JGit, and this will allow me from Java to now do things like the git init, git add, git commit, things that you're doing every time you're generating a project. One little other thing I'm adding into this, and if you're a UI designer, please avert your eyes. I'm just going to add a little checkbox to the top that will allow us to change the behavior of whether or not it's going to do this git init, and even the .git ignore based on whether or not you check it.
Yeah, and when we put this together, we didn't know that one of the main committers on the Initializr project was going to be in the room. Now it feels like we're messing up his baby.
Yeah,
by doing
I'm
this.
sorry.
Yeah, so our apologies.
And I think based on what you were talking about earlier that this might break some of the ID integration functionality.
Oh yeah, that's something I don't know if you guys have seen with Initializr, is that you can actually use like IntelliJ to point at it to do the project generation, which is pretty cool. So we've been showing everything through the web UI, but you also have the option through the IDE.
Okay.
Oh, did you not know that? Or yeah, that's.
So we're going to go through that again. Now, generate my demo. And when you go into that directory, I'm using OMyZ shell. You can see the project has already been initialized.
Yeah, by the fact that it shows which branch he's on, you can see the master up there.
There are a few little subtle pieces that I have documented that around just execution. I think some of the wrapper scripts need to be set executable, and it's being done by the zip process, which happens after you're doing the git setup. I kind of did I had to do a little bit of modification to make sure that that happened as part of the commit. Otherwise, Git was going to say that's different, and there'll be like one delta when you would generate the file. Oh, so there you go, Ted.
Well, if you handled that one, let's take it even a little further. So that was all initializing Git locally, but why not go ahead and call out to GitHub, create a brand new repo on GitHub, and then send the code up in there so the team can really just clone it and start working on their stuff. Can you do that?
Yeah, that's actually really easy. I'm just going to do a git push.
No.
Oh, wait. that didn't work. That didn't work specifically because GitHub doesn't actually know that I'm creating this repo, and it won't let you just arbitrarily push a project. So what I have to do to make that work is introduce another library, which I'll do a checkout to step 8 to do this. That is a GitHub specific library that allows the ability to create projects, repos within GitHub itself. I'm hiding some of my credentials in a properties file, so if you want to do this yourself, you'll need to create that file. I talk about it in this guide, but essentially you can see that all it's doing is actually pretty simple. It goes out to GitHub, creates a repository based on the request name, and adds the description to it. And then once that repository is now available, the project should be able to do a push. But instead of having to go to command line, I'm just going to do that as part of the project itself. So
Initializr will do that work for us. That means that the team doesn't really need to understand any of this. They can just go in and say, here are the dependencies I need for my project. And yes, I want version control, and it'll all get set up for them automatically.
This idea of working with GitHub should really extend to any repository that you use internally. So if you've got something that isn't GitHub, as long as it's got some type of REST API or at least some kind of tooling that you can interact with from within Java, you should be able to do this. I like being able to select that because that's just saving me so much time. Now, it's taking just a little bit longer this time before that download occurred. And if we go to my Git repository, refresh this.
You made me nervous when you said it's taking a little longer.
It's taking a little longer. You can see now that I just created that through the initializer. And since I've got my Readme, it's showing up there now in GitHub with all the selections that I had, all the dependencies, the link to JASP, and the time and date.
Very nice. Yeah, you notice that that's like the actual real GitHub. That's a little scary for a live demo because networking issues are a classic.
Yeah, so just a kind of a funny anecdote on the side. One of my colleagues who is a GitHub fanatic, he's like, what the heck are you doing? As I was going through some of my trial runs of this, because he kept seeing me create these little demo projects, and then I was going in and deleting them. So this is, it's going to show up on your feed as you do this. Hopefully you're creating these for real and not just throwing them away like I am.
All right, great. So we showed that we could integrate with GitHub, but if we're talking about our whole pipeline, kind of from a CD perspective, what can we do further on this? Well, why don't we go ahead and use continuous integration, right? We want all of our teams to be set up with that. So why don't we set them up with standard builds right from the start so that they don't have to go configure their continuous integration. And that'll make it really easy for them to do the right thing. So to do that, we're going to use Travis CI. We're going to go modify Initializr to do a very similar thing where it's going to call out, well, it's going to create the Travis file and then call out and create the project and kick it off.
Yeah, one of the reasons I picked Travis is that it had pretty clean integration with GitHub, and all I had to do was introduce a Travis YAML file to my project generation steps, and I had to do really no extra work to make that happen. So to show you what that looks like, go back to my presentation. Some additional information there when you're working with Travis. You're going to have to generate an Auth Token, kind of like your GitHub Auth Token. Since mine's already available, I'm just going to introduce this. And basically, since Travis is using a lot of defaults. All I have to tell it is that this is a Java project and I want it to build with the Oracle JDK 8. It will infer a lot of other of the details based on the project that I have. You can go in and add all those details if you need to, but I wanted to kind of go with the simplest possible.
Right, and if you think about it, each time you're starting a new project, there's a ton of busy work usually you have to do at the start of the project of, oh, hey, let me go request a version control repo, and let me go request space to run my continuous integrations, and let me go set up all my continuous integrations, my continuous build, any kind of like functional tests that you have automated, all that stuff. And really you have to do all that before you can start to focus on any of the business functionality. So the idea here is that we just automate that whole process. And a team, if they're doing Scrum or something, can basically get everything they need for the start of the project done very, very quickly with this, and then they can focus on the business logic immediately.
Actually, I'm going to cheat on this just in a time frame perspective and check out that code. I'll walk through it. Because I had to introduce another dependency, I'm having to do a refresh and rebuild of the project.
Yeah, DevTools is very nice, but it can't quite do everything for the automatic detection and reload.
Jump too far. So I added the option to basically be able to turn off Travis integration if you didn't want it. And then I'm checking for that as part of the generation process. Travis does not have a nice Java library like the GitHub did. So what I had to do is actually just use the Spring REST template and make the REST calls to Travis. If you've not seen Travis before, by the way, get to a repository. In order to turn on behavior in Travis, you have to sync with your account and then flip a switch before Travis will start doing continuous integration. That's manual, so I'm going to try to work around that through the REST API. So here I'm getting my authorization together. I'm verifying myself as a user. I'm doing the sync through the REST interface. That sync is the sync is asynchronous, so you kind of have to wait for it to be done. So what will happen is the request is going through and just making sure that it's not syncing. There's actually an attribute that Travis gives you back that tells you whether it's syncing or not.
Go ahead and kick it off. Let it cook.
Okay. Since it's a bit of a cooking show.
Yeah. So this one starts to take a little bit more time because the code needs to get up there, and then Travis.org needs to see it and sync, like he was talking about.
So when he says baking, Travis.org is free, so they have a limited number of servers that they can do builds on. You're not always guaranteed to get an immediate build that way, so it may not automatically kick off. So I can talk through a little bit more of this. Basically, again, it's just the steps via REST to activate that repository. I have to have the Travis YAML file in my project when I do the push for Travis now to see it. So Travis will, on push, see that YAML file and then go ahead and start the continuous integration build. And let's see, is that the one I just created? Yeah. I probably shouldn't have picked S. Yeah, S7. So you can see now that Travis is actually kicking off the build. and I'll follow along with it. So it's doing the normal Maven downloads of dependencies, and it will kick off the Maven test.
Yeah, so just to review what happened there, he kind of zipped through quickly, but he had selected the microservice archetype and said, hey, give me a stash, or give me a Git repo. When he clicked that generate button, this time instead of just giving the zip file, it also initialized Git, it called out to GitHub, created a new repo, checked that brand new code up into the repo, created a Travis CI file. Then, because he's got the syncing between travis.org and his Git repo, Travis.org saw that new repo and went ahead and said, oh, I see you want to build. I'm going to go ahead and kick off your build. Although, well, actually, technically speaking, you actually told it to run the build, right? Or,
nope.
No, it did it automatically.
So the presence of Travis YAML on the Git push was what triggered the actual build.
Okay.
So the steps had to be done in just the right way. I had to actually make sure that I did the sync on Travis of the repository, even though there was no code there, trigger it to say, okay, build on check-in of a Travis YAML file, and then do the Git steps that I had.
Mm-hmm.
This is possible, or very easy in this respect, because it's using a configuration file to define the build steps. Other tools that might do continuous integration might be a little harder for you to work with in this respect. So if you had to work with a REST API to be able to create a template and set up your build steps, it's going to be a little bit more work. That's why I kind of like this approach of having a build pipeline file defined within the project itself. It's part of the project. You know what's changed as if anybody's changed the build behavior. This approach would actually work with things like Concourse CI or GitLab very easily. This would just transfer to those individual CI/CD tools.
All right.
And as I said, it can actually take it a little while because it's free. That's a free service.
But in this case, we did actually get the build was successful out there, so everything worked smoothly.
Yeah.
All right, and then back to the slides. Oh. Yep. All right, so we've demonstrated a bunch of integrations here. There's even more stuff you could do. We talked about the ability to add Docker support if you wanted. So if your teams are interested in building a Docker image, you could bake that right into the build process through this. You could add in other application lifecycle management tools like a wiki or issue tracking or things like that. And then what you could also do to really complete the full cycle is ask the team not only what dependencies they want, but what do they want from an environment perspective? You know, do they want a database? Do they want like a messaging service like Rabbit or things like this? And then you could just call out to Cloud Foundry and say spin up an application server, a database, and all these things. And you could also spin up their dev test stage environments. And that then at that point really lets a team get started on the business functionality right away, and they can be productive and demoing to their business within that first sprint.
Yeah, if you remember the presentation around the circle of code, I consider this kind of like the origin of that circle of code, is that this is how you get your code into that process of being able to go through those cycles. This is the origin story of your code, so to speak.
Right, right. Yeah, and for the reference architectures, we mentioned mobile would be another possible reference architecture for just like a rich web application. You can have an Angular-based application or React, and like I said, you could bake in your standard look and feel. You could bake in your standard monitoring solutions that you like your teams to use, all that kind of stuff. So here are the links. The presentation link, when you were looking at all the instructions for that, that's what he was looking at right there. And then the code link, that's basically the forked initializer with all the branches showing really everything we demoed here today. So you can take a look at that. And then the last link is just the general GitHub project where all these repos are at.
I know there's obviously that step missing from the project that I started to document. I just didn't get time to finish it, but the goal was to go from Travis to push to Pivotal Web Services. And actually, within Travis, that's about 5 or 6 lines of the Travis YAML to do that. So it wouldn't be too hard to take what's there already and go ahead and see part of that vision. I think if you would then included the manifest along with it as part of the generation process, you're really close to being able to see end to end from Initializr to production and available for your users to hit.
Yeah, and we're really excited about this concept because not only does it get the team started quickly, but because they're provisioned in a very standard way, we've already seen there's lots of additional things you can start to add into that. So this is just kind of scratching the surface of what's possible.
I want to open it for questions.
Yeah, so are there any questions? So did it make sense? It's all right, good. It's kind of a bit much to catch in 50 minutes, but 60 minutes.
Okay, thanks for coming.